goes for many, many other in the public service and elsewhere. Their voice, visibility, participation, and representation in elective and appointive positions remain very low compared to men. This is because women are mostly poorly educated, and even where they are educated, entrenched customs and traditions, political violence, sometimes reprisals, lack of confidence to vie for public positions because of the illiteracy rates, the high illiteracy rates among women, sometimes make it very difficult for them to vie for these positions, especially the elective ones. You can only therefore talk about equal pay when men and women have equal access to work of different nature. What then do we need to do or to put in place in order to address the barriers? I would say progressive laws in the first instance. The absence of full implementation of progressive laws that protect and promote the participation of women remains the elephant in the room. Sierra Leone has had a number of progressive gender laws that seeks to promote gender equality. However, they have either not been fully implemented or did not go far enough. And I believe this is the case in many other countries in Africa, particularly fragile states. There is currently a bill, hopefully in Parliament, which, if enacted, will change somehow the dynamics and increase the opportunities for women in Sierra Leone. This bill will mandate a 30% seats of the 145 seat parliament to be occupied by women. It currently stands at only 12%. And same for cabinet positions, which are now only occupied by women, comprising 5% of cabinet positions are held by women, which is very low. And the bill also, when enacted, aims to improve women's access to finance and to link government spending to improving gender equality. So these are very interesting provisions in the bill. We, however, know that equality will not only be achieved through legislative mechanisms, fundamentally because the scourge of gender inequality is directly linked to prejudices rooted in society. Changing mentalities, as we all know, does not happen overnight. Still, this is the means that can probably make the most significant contribution. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is important that measures to reconcile work and family life may have a considerable contributions in terms of wage equality, and that path will have to be taken fundamentally in this direction. Let me also say that it is only when men and women have equal access to work that will start to refocus our energies on equal pay for work of equal value. For now in Sierra Leone, for a male director and a female director get the same salary, same for a male or female parliamentarian. However, these positions are still dominated by men. So the issue of equal pay is somehow nuanced. There is therefore, for me, the issue of how do we define equal pay or fair pay, which is not universally established. We have a number of concepts that all speak to fair pay in different ways and are more or less relevant to different societies. So for us in Sierra Leone, we might say there is equal pay for men or women doing the same job as I've just highlighted. The issue therefore is for us women to have equal access to work as do men. Only then that will start to measure the issue of equal pay. Which means therefore women must be educated and empowered enough to compete with their male counterparts for jobs. Women, however, still need to overcome the enormous challenges which I have just highlighted. We all know that discrimination based on gender and the lack of respect for women's rights is a problem that affects all continents in general and Africa in particular. In West Africa, despite the efforts since the 20s, these barriers to full economic, social, political participation of women continue to persist. Let me end by noting also that COVID-19 has indeed been harder on women than it has been on men. This is because women occupy those jobs that were really affected by the crisis in the retail sector, hospitality, caregiving, domestic work, all of which did not allow teleworking as we are doing now. There is therefore an urgent need for us to address gender inequality in all spheres of life in the African continent and in fragile states in particular. It is the way to go and the way to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and to ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Cara Abi, muito obrigada pela intervenção e pelos comentários relativamente à experiência da Serra Leoa. É sempre um prazer rever-te. De seguida, passaríamos então a palavra à senhora embaixadora Satu Kleven, embaixadora da Finlândia em Portugal e que assume a co-presidência permanente deste fórum, cujo agradecimento da parte do G7+, quer da delegação de Lisboa, quer do secretariado, é enorme pelo apoio sempre demonstrado pelo Sr. Embaixador, e daremos então a palavra para dar também início ao fórum. Muito obrigada, Sra. Embaixadora.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anna, for the introduction and let me first of all join the Secretary General in thanking you all who have joined today, the speakers, for your valuable contributions that we have already heard from Sierra Leone, and we will hear from many other places. And the special thanks, of course, to Her Excellency Minister of Foreign Affairs and Communities of Sao Tome and Principe, who will be joining us very shortly. And also I wanted to very much thank the Secretariat and European Hub here for organizing, for putting together this excellent webinar once again, the second of the G7+ Women Forum initiative. The theme is extremely relevant in all countries globally, in all G7+ countries, but in all other countries as well. And so what I wanted to speak about in my brief intervention is to take a look at what are the recommendations, for instance, especially from the United Nations to eliminate the gender pay gap. But the title of my presentation is "What steps are still needed to get equal pay for work of equal value?" So I will go through to see a little bit what are the key recommendations. And I would like to focus on this coalition called EPIC, which is the Coalition of Equal Pay International Coalition. It's run by UN Women, ILO, International Labour Organization, and OECD. And it's a multi-stakeholder coalition. All the relevant stakeholders can be involved, be they governments or employers or employees, organizations, private sector, civil society, and academia. And so the Secretariat is run by UN Women, ILO, and OECD, and then it has the large network from all over the world. And what I think makes it extremely valuable because it identifies best practices. it sort of it gathers information from all the stakeholders involved to see what kind of measures have worked, what have not worked that well, and then spreads the message among the other members. That of course then it's extremely valuable when countries are at the national level the designing tools, the drafting legislation, the building capacity, the improving policies and so forth. Then you don't have to always start from the beginning, but you can look for the very useful lessons and very concrete tools from other countries, from other stakeholders that can be of assistance here. So it works at the global and regional and national levels, and it you know, they do a lot of research, they do a lot of advocacy, they have technical advisory services, which can be quite interesting, and then they also have this network of advocates or champions, like well-known figures who can promote the issue at the regional or national or global level. Then they have a system of pledges. Employers, different organizations, governments can make concrete pledges on an issue that is particularly relevant in their context. And when it's given this publicity, then there is an extra incentive to make those reforms through. They also have this different kinds of campaigns, like Stop the Robbery campaign, which I found quite interesting. It was a campaign where they were a man and a woman. They put they put a stand on the street where they would do shoe polishing services, and it was like the man is if the man polishes your shoes, it's $1, and if the woman polishes your shoes, it's only 82 cents. And that was to highlight, you know, that this is the reality. You know, this is how women get paid less. And it was an eye opener for many people who approached then and felt, of course, really embarrassed then to pay less for the woman. But I think it was a good example of awareness raising. Well, how how much is the gender pay gap then globally? We've seen different numbers, but I think that on the EPIC, for instance, they talk about 17% less. But it can be much higher in some regions, and it can be much higher than for some groups, some minority groups, for instance. Then they can suffer from both a gender bias and then also discrimination based on other causes. So it can go quite significantly. But in Europe, for instance, we have measured that every year a woman works 59 days for free compared to men. 55 days, when you compare the salary to men, women don't get any salary for 59 days if you calculate it in that manner, and it's quite a significant issue. So and then of course one important question is what does it mean, equal pay for equal work? First, of course it means that men and women in similar or identical jobs they have of course to receive same pay and and other remunerations and other benefits. When we talk about health benefits or vacation or bonuses and things like that, it's very important to look at the whole picture, so that sort of a hidden sort of a remunerations couldn't be added to this benefit of women. But it also applies the principle to work that is completely different, but can be shown to be of equal value. And I think that here is really where we need, where a lot of work needs to be done. Because traditionally, it very often so that, you know, the professions that are very strongly women dominated, those skills have not been perhaps valued in society as in monetary terms as much as you know, skills relating to jobs that have been traditionally more male dominated. So I think that here there is a huge work to be done, and a lot has already been done. And one of the tools that has, you know, that is been advocated for instance by this coalition, but by many others, is also always the gender neutral job evaluations. That that the jobs are like objectively evaluated on the basis of the skills needed, you know, what kind of qualifications you need, what kind of education you need, what kind of responsibility it bears, an objective evaluation. And for instance, when we think about in many countries, care work is often underpaid. And when you look at the responsibilities, they are huge. You can be responsible for, you know, you're responsible for the safety and security of a child or an elderly person or a sick person or so forth. The responsibility is huge, but traditionally I don't think that this responsibility has been valued the way it should be valued. So this is one thing that is extremely important to make an objective sort of a criteria. And I read that here in Portugal, for instance, there was the employers and employees organizations together with the government, they created a methodology for this, looking at the workers' skills and the demands of the jobs, the efforts needed, responsibility, working conditions and so forth. And then it's important to look at from the clean table objectively, okay, without sort of being biased by the traditions and sort of traditional ways of thinking that, okay, what is tough work and what are the tough working conditions. We have to take a new fresh look at these issues. And some other very important issues are wage transparency laws. The transparency in the remuneration system has been also identified as really a key issue. And of course, there are many ways of doing it, many different types of legislation that can be adopted that is best suited for the country in questions and so forth. Then collective bargaining, but that can be a very extremely important forum to take up these issues, to look at them comprehensively, objectively. Then, of course, labor inspection. It's important to have inspections to be done on this, and then if there are issues, if there are the problems, then to go forward with that. And I wanted to just mention a few examples from different countries of tools that have been adopted. For instance, in Indonesia, a ministerial decision requires enterprises to establish wage structures and wage scales on the basis of job analysis, job description, and job evaluation. Then in Kenya, there is the Kenyan Employment Act provides that where discrimination is alleged, for instance, in cases concerning equal remuneration, the employer shall bear the burden of proving that the discrimination did not take place. And this is, of course, important because you might not have always the information that is needed. So it's the burden of proof can be switched in that case. From South Africa, there is an example of the Employment Equity Act, which requires employers to include statements on differences in income between male and female employees as part of their employment equity report. So that kind of forces employers, to explain the practices, and then of course make changes. And if there are like disproportional differentials, employers must take measures to reduce these differentials. Then, for instance, in Australia, there's an example from a court case from the highest labor tribunal, which found that low pay in the social, community, home care, and disability services industry were gender-based, and these are professions where more than 80% are women, the workers. So the trade unions and government negotiated an equal remuneration order, which established wage increases of up to 45% for women workers. So it led to such a huge increase when it was found out that there were the gender gap in the payment. But then, for instance, in El Salvador, there's a labor inspectorate that has established a specialized unit on gender and non-discrimination to enable labor inspectors to address equal pay issues. These were just some examples of different types of tools from around the world, and also which then through the coalition that I mentioned, one can access this kind of this kind of information and concrete examples of tools that work. It's also a very topical issue also in the agenda of the European Union. We've had legislation for years and years and years, but still, and in some countries the progress has gone up, and in some countries steps have been taken forward. So it's an issue that we constantly need attention, and now there is a big process to further improve the legislative basis on these questions, so that it will be easier to achieve also through legal means these targets. And then just finally, so why is it so important? First of all, it's a question of human rights. It's a question of non-discrimination. It's a right. It's that must be enforceable. Extremely important to, I think, to bear this human rights approach in mind. It is also fair. It's only fair that everybody gets paid the same amount for similar effort. And of course, it's then extremely important when we think about eradication of poverty. We have to look at all the sort of the reasons underlying poverty. And when we see that, okay, unequal pay is one of the causes, it has to be tackled also as a poverty eradication measure. And then, of course, it increases, financial independence of women, which then increases sort of the decision-making power in society as well. So an extremely important issue from many different aspects. The problem that is of global nature, which means also that together we can find the solutions, because many good practices have been identified. So none of us need to be alone in this fight. We can inspire and encourage each other. Thank you so much. Thank you once more, and I'm so grateful to be involved in this women's forum. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to good discussions and presentations.
Obrigada, Senhora Embaixadora. É um prazer, como sempre, tê-la aqui conosco. De seguida iremos para o segundo painel, é que temos as perspectivas sobre a implementação de remuneração igual para trabalho igual, de valor igual. Portanto, daremos as boas-vindas a este painel à senhora doutora Rita Correia, e damos nota de que o senhor Nicolau Suni e a doutora Milena Pires, infelizmente, não poderão estar connosco devido a problemas de saúde, e passaremos de imediato a palavra à doutora Rita Correia para fazer a sua apresentação do ponto de vista fiscal sobre a matéria que aqui estamos a tratar neste fórum. Bem-vinda.
Obrigada, bom dia, Ana. Muito obrigada pela introdução. I'm going to try to speak in English and my presentation in English. First of all, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Mr. Helder da Costa, Secretary General of G7 Plus, for inviting me to participate in this forum and to be given the opportunity to discuss this very interesting theme on gender equality issues. My name is Rita Correia. I'm a lawyer and a partner with the Miranda Law Firm, a member of Miranda Alliance, which is a network of law firms with offices in Timor-Leste and several African countries, as well as in Portugal. So the theme, the focus of my presentation today is to briefly discuss how tax policy may affect gender equality. And starting with the first slide, which by the way is not working, sorry. Oh, okay, it's just slow. So tax laws and the way tax systems are structured are a powerful instrument used by the states to model and influence behavior and pursue public interest. The states define certain objectives for the tax system through a certain tax policy. Such objectives constitute the public interest as defined from time to time. Examples of tax law objectives are, for instance, equality, gender equality, promotion of investment, sustainable development, public health, and housing policies. Typically, there are two main tools that can be used to achieve these goals, either through the provision of tax benefits, whereby the states promote and incentivize certain behavior and investments, for instance. And we can give you as an example exemption on interest from savings accounts, so that to encourage savings, reduction of corporate income tax for investments in priority industries or underdeveloped regions, so to promote region investment in certain far end regions, exemptions on property tax on the purchase of houses intended as primary residence, so to promote housing. And then we have also aggravated taxation for instance, through excise duties on tobacco products, increased taxation on petroleum products, luxury goods, or high sugar beverages, for instance. The tax revenues are the main source of income for states, and typically one of the main goals of the tax system and the tax policy is to promote economic growth, based on an equality principle which is often provided for in the Constitution, in the state's constitutional law. In times of crisis, such as the one that we are living now following the pandemic, this environment may influence the way the tax fairness is construed, so that this becomes almost equivalent to what is good for purposes of economic growth, with less consideration for social justice and human rights. This may lead to increased economic gaps and poverty. So when we talk about women, they tend to be less wealthier than men, with less income, often not caught by the tax net, and more engaged in informal economy and providing for non-paid care. Many women, particularly in developing countries, are not even involved in the labor supply market. A tax policy, therefore, is based on underlying choices that may have a negative or positive impact on women when compared to men, depending on the choices made by the states. Now, most tax systems are supposed to be gender neutral and apparently provide for gender equality. There are, however, exceptions to this principle of gender neutrality, and there are situations where explicit biases can be found in tax law. These explicit biases mean that the tax law contains provisions that treat women and men differently and typically provide for a less favorable treatment to women. Examples of these explicit biases are, for instance, prohibition for women to deduct certain expenses, higher taxation exemption thresholds for women, and allocation of income to husband's tax return. These are, therefore, situations where it's clear that the tax law provides for a different treatment. But in other cases, the tax law is only apparently gender neutral, as the law provides for implicit biases. In these cases, the wording of the tax regulations is gender neutral, but nevertheless affects men and women differently due to pre-existing structural socioeconomic inequalities or differences between men and women. So examples of these implicit biases are, for instance, mandatory joint filing of tax returns, which increase the tax rate of lower income earners, which are typically women. VAT rates for household goods have also higher impacts on women's available income, as women are typically the primary consumers of such goods. Higher deduction on employment income typically favor men because women are more likely to be involved in informal economy and self-employed instead of being on an employment on a dependent employment basis. We did some research on some in several tax systems to give an illustration, to be able to give an illustration of bias that can be found in tax laws in these systems. For instance, last month, well, actually this month, it became effective in Angola a new tax benefits code, which increases the deduction with salaries for corporate income tax purposes upon creation of new jobs for women. So in case new jobs are created for women, a company can have a double deduction when compared to the creation of a job for a man. In Guinea-Bissau, for instance, certain salary increases may be double deducted by corporate taxpayers. In Senegal, for instance, children increase the deduction to the taxable income of both parents to the extent they are both income earners. So these are situations where the tax policy chose to treat women more favorably. On the other side of the equation, we have situations where women are treated less favorably or even discriminated in a negative way by the tax system. And these examples of this can be found, for instance, in Gabon, where a mandatory joint taxation is in place. So this means that separate taxation of women is only allowed in some cases. And mandatory joint taxation typically means that the income earned by the women is more heavily taxed, because typically the rate, the applicable rate is higher, because the income earned by the husband is typically higher than the one earned by the women. In Morocco, for instance, deduction of costs with children is assigned to the husband, unless the children and the husband are legally at charge of the wife. Other example, in Congo Brazzaville, women who are single, married, or with only employment income, divorced or widowed, must have a court decision to be able to deduct costs with their children. In Chad, we have examples in both ways. So women whose husbands are not taxed in Chad are taxed as single women without children, so they are unable to deduct costs with children. On the other hand, women are exempt from civic tax. In Togo, we can find a provision providing for individual filing system, where spouses are free to determine allocations of costs with children, subject to a statement made to their employer. However, in the event no statement is made, the husband is entitled to the deduction. In the UE or in Europe, things tend to be slightly different, and as the level of gender equality increases, we see a shift between the tax policy being more focused on indirect taxes than on personal taxation. And that's why we find in Portugal or in the UK a rule specifically exempting women hygiene items from VAT. Or in Portugal, we are also discussing a similar rule in the new state budget law for 2022. So working mothers in Spain are entitled to a tax rebate until the child reaches 3 years of age. In Luxembourg, however, it's mandatory for a joint tax filing for husband and wife, which typically is less favorable to women, which earn less than men. In Greece, until 2018, separate taxation. There was a separate taxation, but there was a joint filing system, with the husband being the recipient of any tax refunds. So we can find examples of positive and negative biases in several tax systems, either express biases or implicit biases. In terms of some kind of final remarks, we can. It is therefore clear that biases can be used either to improve or worsen gender equality, and positive discrimination or different treatment of women may be justified when there are underlying structural inequalities. And also, as we have seen in the examples given, the types of biases vary according to the cultural context, complexity of the tax systems, or on the level of gender equality that has been achieved in the relevant state. In developing countries, most biases are focused on personal income taxation, while in other countries where gender equality increase, or the levels of gender equality are higher, other types of biases are put in place. For instance, indirect taxes, property taxes, among others. So it is important to also take into account that considerations of human rights or women's rights considerations may also lead us to discuss what should be the goals of the tax policy as perhaps needing to go beyond a mere formal equality and try to achieve a more substantive equality, and therefore less focus on economic growth, but seek inclusive growth instead. I think the main issue that needs to be taken into account in a tax policy is that pre-existing structural differences in equality between women and men ultimately justify going beyond providing the same treatment. So we are not exactly favoring just the same treatment or a pure equality or a mere formal equality gender. Same treatment often equates to implicit biases when there are underlying inequalities. And this means that positive discrimination favoring women is, in my view, justified in those cases. So examples of measures that can have a positive impact on women's social and economic life are, for instance, or could be, for instance, reduction of personal income tax for the years after maternity. For instance, when, in particular, in liberal professions, the income that a woman earns in the year of maternity is considerably lower, and if the tax rate, the tax level is maintained, this means that it is a double. It's a less favorable treatment in opposite to the promotion and incentivize maternity. Also, example of the Angola tax benefit code, such as the doubling of deduction with women salary costs, seems to be a good way of incentivizing companies to hire women. So these are examples of measures that can be taken by the states when defining a certain tax policy, and which have is a very powerful instrument to influence behaviors and ultimately improve the life standing for women. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Hope this was interesting. Thank you.
Senhora Doutora Rita Correia, muito obrigada por ter estado connosco e partilhado as suas ideias, muitas delas inovadoras, que eu espero que quem está por trás das políticas públicas as possam seguir. Deixamos um agradecimento especial a si e à sua equipa e passaremos então para uma outra apresentação que farei em nome do Fórum. A disparidade salarial entre homens e mulheres, uma análise estatística dos países do G7+. Em nome do Fórum do G7+, de Lisboa e do Secretariado do Fórum que represento, daremos início a uma pequena análise onde tentamos recolher alguns dados estatísticos sobre os países do G7+. Passaremos então a analisar os dados que foram recolhidos relativamente à situação no mundo, antes de avançarmos para os países do G7. Estes dados já foram mencionados pela senhora embaixadora da Finlândia em Portugal, na sua apresentação. Damos nota de que, segundo os dados oficiais recolhidos junto do Secretariado-Geral das Nações Unidas e da UN Women, e bem assim da OIT, podemos concluir que só no ano de 2277 poderá ocorrer a igualdade salarial entre homens e mulheres. Estamos a ver que, neste momento, a proporção é bastante lenta. A manter estas tendências desta evolução, só mesmo daqui a 250 anos é que podemos falar de uma verdadeira igualdade. Podemos ver que, pelo trabalho, hoje em dia pagam um homem e mulher nas mesmas condições. Esse trabalho é remunerado para um homem em $1 e para a mulher em 80 cêntimos. As mulheres ganham, assim, em média, apenas 20%, ganham 20% menos do que os homens. Este gap salarial torna-se mais evidente quando as mulheres têm filhos. Podemos ainda ver que há regiões no mundo onde a progressão tem sido mais lenta e muitos deles acolhem países do G7+. Assim é o caso da África subsaariana, a Ásia do Sul, o Norte de África e o Médio Oriente. Passando para o próximo slide, podemos avaliar, em termos económicos, qual é o impacto desta disparidade salarial. O gap entre os rendimentos esperados de homens e mulheres ao longo da vida é de 172 bilhões de dólares, quase 2 vezes o PIB anual do mundo. Se as mulheres pudessem participar nas economias em termos igualitários aos homens, o PIB mundial aumentaria em 26%. Em termos de legislação, também esta questão já foi abordada pela nossa presidente do Fórum, a doutora Abi Camara, quando falava na questão da legislação a ser implementada nos países frágeis. A verdade é que menos de metade dos países do mundo têm legislação que garante a igualdade salarial entre homens e mulheres. Nos restantes países, as leis restringem o tipo de trabalho e as horas que as mulheres podem trabalhar, afetando cerca de 1,6 mil milhões de mulheres no mundo inteiro. Este número é absolutamente expressivo quando falamos que em 18 países atualmente os maridos ainda podem impedir legalmente as mulheres de trabalhar. No que concerne aos países do G7+, em especial, gostaríamos de mencionar que um dos grandes desafios que podemos constatar é a própria ausência de dados de muitos dos países que compõem o G7+. Ora bem, a grande falta de dados estatísticos desagregados por sexo. Existem poucas estatísticas fiáveis e comparáveis sobre a igualdade salarial. No próximo slide, em que estamos a ver os países do G7+. O Burundi, as Ilhas Comores, Libéria e Timor-Leste estão entre os países com a maior igualdade na remuneração média por sexo. Há diferenças entre países nos indicadores laborais. Por exemplo, a taxa de participação das mulheres no mercado de trabalho vai desde 6% no Iêmen a 15% no Afeganistão, a 79% no Burundi e a 83% nas Ilhas Salomão. Chamamos ainda a atenção que em todos os países dos G7+, tal como já apontado pela senhora embaixadora da Finlândia em Portugal aqui neste fórum, as economias com grande peso do setor informal, a proporção das mulheres que trabalham no setor informal é muito superior à dos homens, para o qual, infelizmente, não temos grandes dados. Passando agora para além da remuneração igual para o trabalho igual. Nos países dos G7+, a grande proporção das mulheres trabalham em profissões ou ocupações de remunerações mais baixas, o que representa, naturalmente, menores salários. Podemos confirmar isto pela pequena tabela que vem em nossa apresentação. O Afeganistão, Costa do Marfim, o Iémen, as Ilhas Salomão, a Libéria, Papua Nova Guiné, a Serra Leoa, a Somália, Timor-Leste e Togo apresentam proporções de mulheres em posições de gestão, quadros séniores e médios face aos homens. Infelizmente, relativamente a outros países, é absolutamente, neste momento, impossível apresentar dados estatísticos comparativos. Podemos dizer que destes países destacamos claramente o Togo, Timor-Leste, a Somália e a Libéria como países cuja proporção em posições de gestão face aos homens assume menor. Chamamos a atenção para também o quadro legal que a nossa oradora, a doutora Rita Correia, chamava a atenção sobre a necessidade de existirem instrumentos jurídicos que possam, no fundo, ajudar a complementar as disparidades. Uma delas é, naturalmente, a Convenção sobre a Igualdade de Remuneração de Homens e Mulheres por Trabalho Igual de Igual Valor, celebrada em 1951, e ainda a Convenção Internacional sobre a Eliminação de todas as formas de discriminação sobre as mulheres. Estes são os objetivos para um crescimento económico inclusivo, o emprego pleno e produtivo e o trabalho digno para todos. Falamos dos Objetivos Sustentáveis de Desenvolvimento, que são a matriz do desenvolvimento da humanidade, anunciados pelas Nações Unidas e sempre proclamadas pelo Sr. Secretário-Geral, o Engenheiro António Guterres, em todas as suas intervenções, pela promoção da igualdade dos direitos das mulheres, face aos direitos já reconhecidos em muitos ordenamentos jurídicos aos homens. Assim sendo, até 2030 é necessário alcançar o emprego pleno e produtivo, trabalho decente para todas as mulheres e homens, inclusive para os jovens, pessoas com deficiências e remuneração igual para trabalho igual. É assim necessário, de acordo com o ODS 5, acabar com todas as formas de discriminação contra as mulheres e meninas em toda a parte, reconhecer e valorizar o trabalho de assistência doméstica não remunerado, o trabalho informal que muitas das mulheres e meninas dos países frágeis ficam desprotegidas, tal como a nossa intervenção da doutora Abi Camara no início, em que mencionava o caso específico da Serra Leoa. E ainda é necessário realizar reformas para dar às mulheres os direitos iguais aos recursos económicos, para se atingir o mais cedo possível uma igualdade salarial. Estes são apenas alguns dados estatísticos que podemos recolher durante o trabalho com os nossos oradores e com o secretariado do fórum, que partilhamos com todos vocês e que estarão disponíveis posteriormente na página do secretariado. Deixo os meus agradecimentos a todos os que colaboraram, desde o Secretariado de DIL e a Delegação de Lisboa, dos G7+, na elaboração e na recolha destes dados estatísticos, e de hora avante passo de imediato a palavra ao novo painel, que será liderado pela nossa colega, a doutora Elcia Silvestre, do Secretariado-Geral de Dili, que se encontra em Timor-Leste, que fará, no fundo, o primeiro debate, discussão e partilha de experiências sobre esta matéria, com 3 dos focal points que passarei a indicar. No fundo, é da política à prática. A doutora Elcia Silvestre irá ter consigo o focal point do Estado-membro de São Tomé e Príncipe, a representação de São Tomé e Príncipe, a representação da Libéria e a representação do Sudão do Sul. Damos as boas-vindas à senhora doutora Elcia Silvestre, que se encontra em Timor-Leste. Bem-vinda de Lisboa.
Um, Hello, Dr. Anna, thank you for giving me the floor. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. Welcome to the third panel discussion from this forum with the theme From Policy to Practice, Discussion and Sharing of Experience. As Dr. Anna has briefly introduced myself, I'm Helge Sylvester. I work as the Media and Communication Officer at the G7 Plus Secretariat in Dili, Timor-Leste. I will moderate the sessions. As you may have heard some of the interesting points raised in the first and second panel discussion, highlighting the challenges and recommendations of the eliminating the gender pay gap, there are also some good progress that worth to mention here. According to the World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report in 2021, which used benchmark on 4 key dimensions, namely economic participation and opportunities, equal attainment, educational attainment, health and survival, and the political empowerment, the findings of the report shows a surprisingly positive fact from several G7 plus member countries. Timor-Leste and Togo are among 5 most improved countries in the overall index in 2021 for improving gender gap. At the same time, we have Côte d'Ivoire, Timor-Leste, and Togo are also among the 4 countries that have managed to close their economic participation and opportunity gap by at least 1 full percentage point in 1 year, while Burundi and Liberia are also seeing improvement in gender aspect. This is an encouraging news as we navigate through post-pandemic recovery. Let me briefly introduce our speaker for this panel discussions. We are supposed to have 3 panel discussion, but due to urgent matter, Mr. Fon Gobrea from Liberia, he's in a meeting, so he might be joining a little bit later. I would like to introduce my first panel, Ms. Neuza Raquel Costa Lima, a lawyer, a director at the Ministry of Planning, Finance and Blue Economy in São Tomé Príncipe. I also have Ms. Luel Bueda, Assistant Inspector for Aid Coordination at the Ministry of Finance and Planning in South Sudan. Ms. Aluel is attending this forum together with colleagues from the Ministry of Gender and Social Welfare of South Sudan and South Sudan Women Bloc. Thank you for joining us and my warm welcome to all the panelists. In these sessions, we will explore what are the mechanisms and approaches the G7 plus member countries put in place to address gender pay gap to ensure that we are building inclusive social justice and sustainable and peaceful community. Since for this session, we only have 40 minutes, I propose that we start with the following question to all speakers. Let me start by giving the floor to Ms. Aluel Bueda first. Ms. Aluel, I understand that you are joined by colleagues at the Ministry of Gender and Social Welfare. So before you start your intervention, may you introduce your colleagues? Thank you.
Yeah, it's now for you. Thank you for having us today. My name is Chola Good, the Acting Director for Aid Coordinations. I was gone, but Mr. Luel is currently not here in the room. So in her place, please allow me to welcome our team and maybe deliver you a statement on our women issues in South Sudan. Thank you.
Sure, you may have 5 minutes to start your intervention. My first question, sorry, I didn't read my question before. My first question would be, I'm just reading through this. Could you please share with us what the current situation with the gender pay gap in South Sudan and how is the government role in helping equal pay for equal work there? Thank you.
All right, thank you. I do have the Honorable Amel Manyok here. I'll present that to you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. My name is Amer Deng, Chairperson Women Bloc of South Sudan. Around here, we have a representative from Women Bloc. There we have our sister Elizabeth, and we have Sister Lily Sebastiana, and we have Brother Achil Malik, he's also our consultant, and we have our Brother Chol, myself, and Alwen will be coming soon. The Ministry of Gender are not around here, but on behalf of women of South Sudan, we will speak on their behalf.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining this one.
Thank you so much. Could you please share with us what we are currently situation with the gender gap, gender pay gap in your country, and how is the government role in helping realize the equal pay for gender work? Well, I think those are the two questions. The other question is what future steps or partnership may be necessary to address equal pay for equal work challenges faced by fragile and conflict-affected states on their path.
Exactly. I will come to that second question in a minute, but first I would just want to throw the first question to the panelists from South Sudan and also São Tomé and Príncipe. After we wrap up the first question, then we will come to the second questions. So you may have the floor for the first questions, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In South Sudan, our labor laws protects women's rights to equal pay for equal work. In all government posts, the policy in that the rights of women, rights minimums is the 35% reference to access to employment. Women also have equal right to compete in the remaining 65% job employment. The Bill of Rights, in accordance to South Sudan Constitution, is equal citizens between men and women. The South Sudan labor laws mandate equal pay for equal work value. Under the Labor Act 2017 laws of South Sudan, it both recognize the mandate and the responsibilities given to the government under International Labor Law, ILO, and by the Act itself. It is clearly established on the issues surrounding equal payment for the job done across all the gender parity. While it was also for the government of the Republic of South Sudan, GRSS, to embark on the ambitious gender mainstreaming programs, resolutions of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan 2015 and 2018. And 2018, when the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan provided the overall duty of the Tribunal to promote gender mainstreaming, women and youth empowerment, participation of women and youth in the leadership and decision-making. Similarly, under the Chapter 4 of the Revitalized Agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan, RCIS, it requires the revitalized Transitional Government of National Unity, Tribunal, to embark on the radical PFM reforms, which also encompass gender mainstreaming management, strengthening and capacity building for the institutions, legislative review on vital legal framework, and enhance of their basic functions in reforming on gender mainstreaming and giving the equal job opportunities for both women and men. The revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan, RCIS has also designated one of the highest gender office in the country. That is the Office of the Vice President for Gender and Youth Cluster, whose responsibility is under Her Excellency, Madam Rebecca de Mabior. Is under Her Excellency Rebecca de Mabior, the Vice President for Gender and Youth Cluster. Through this office, the cluster ministerial committee, which ensure the continuations of the joint cluster activities that are chaired by Her Excellency, the Vice President for Youth and for Vice President for Gender and Youth, while other members are the Ministers of Gender, Child and Social Welfare, of Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management, Ministry of Culture, Museum and National Heritage, and Ministry of Youth and Sport, respectively. They make formable decisions on various projects, policies, and gender mainstreaming reforms to ensure equal payment for the work done by both women and men. One of the ongoing reforms in equal payment for the work done by gender mainstreaming is to engage the government through its various public institutions in terms of policy development and upgrading to advocate for equal payment for the job done well as the development partners for the technical and financial support in the projects they implement. To support the current government policies on the equal reunification for the work done, both the civil servants and private sectors, both of which are equally tasked by the law to adhere to their mandate and ensure that the implementation of the labor law in the Republic of South Sudan is safeguarded, including their programs. Priorities in the Republic of South Sudan through enhancing gender mainstreaming, women and youth empowerment, participation of women and youth in leadership and decision making. Challenges. However, due to long history of armed conflict, women have not been able to close the gender gap in the Republic of South Sudan. The workforce, even though this ratio is implemented as planned, internal conflict continue to create humanitarian crisis with the displacement of the population and reversal of development gains. Those conflicts disproportionately affected women who suffer livelihood consequently on the violence, deprivation of loss of livelihoods. Those responsibilities for families' well-being in those difficult circumstances places burden on women. Way forward and recommendations. Improve protections and security for women, South Sudan and development partners to respond effectively. Below is how the labor law is trying to address the issues in the policies in the Republic of South Sudan, including to capacitate on the current call for the government to ensure that labor rights are upheld especially on the equal payment for any work done as part of the implementation of the labor laws and policies. To identify and prioritize key gaps that are missing and may need a law to be enacted or policies to be developed for enhancements of the gender mainstreaming, women and youth empowerment. So that is our statement. We can share it with you. But in reality, as women of South Sudan, we did not fulfill the 35% affirmative action. Starting from the presidency, we have 5 vice presidents and 1 president, which there are 6 in number. We are supposed to have 2 female on the top, which did not happen, but they have tried their best. And again, the 35% affirmative action, you can realize it. Yes, it is not 35% complete, but at least there is something. But when it comes, it starts from the state level up to counties level, up to Payam's level, there is a lot of gap in terms of participation of women. And when it comes also to giving award for the contract, and especially on the private sector, we actually don't get. That is what I can say. Maybe if 1 or 2 qualified to be awarded on the biddings of the contracts, maybe 1 or 2 persons, but it cannot even reach 2% or 1%. For the youth, which youth are supposed to get, because youth are both boys and girls, they're supposed to get 20%, but it's not happening. The same thing to women, we are not getting those awards. So we have a lot of challenges when it comes to health. We have a lot of health issues. Majority of women really don't get health support, and which those challenges are still affecting us in terms of maternity health care or health insurance. In South Sudan, we have a big issue. We are losing a lot of people. So we need to be supported in that area. And we also need to do the gender analysis. We have tried our level best, but we have a gap because financially, we did not get the support, so that we have the data on, because so many women complain when it comes to promotions. In terms of promotions, they are qualified, they get all what it takes, but to be promoted there is a challenge. For example, now we are in the Ministry of Finance, but it never happened for any woman to be under secretary in this ministry. There are always top or 4 top leadership, but we never enter there. The same thing in the Bank of South Sudan. There are 4 or 5 top leaders, but we never get there. So I think recently we have a speaker, which is a female. Also, we also appreciate that because we have a female, which is a speaker, and we have a vice president, but also the gap are still huge. So thank you so much for the listening. If there is any additional from my colleagues, they are free to add something. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you for giving us the update for what is the government of South Sudan, especially the women bloc in South Sudan, is putting in place. This is very encouraging. I will come back later to you with another follow-up question. But now let me give the floor to Ms. Nilza from Sao Tome and Principe. Ms. Nilza, you also have 5 minutes to share what are the progress, the initiative that the government of Sao Tome and Principe is taking in addressing the issue of gender pay. Thank you. Ms. Nilza, you're still muted. Can you please turn on your microphone? Thank you.
Bom dia a todos. Excelentíssima. Ok. Bom dia a todos. Excelentíssimo senhor Dr. Helder da Costa, secretário-geral do G7+, excelentíssima senhora ministra dos Negócios Estrangeiros de Santo Tomé e Príncipe, senhora Edith Tenjua, excelentíssima senhora embaixadora da Finlândia, doutora Satu, excelentíssima senhora Abi Camara, presidente permanente deste fórum G7+ Mulheres. Agradeço a G7+ pelo convite endereçado a Santo Tomé e Príncipe e particularmente a mim, enquanto corpo focal do G7+ em Santo Tomé e Príncipe, para estar presente neste fórum, partilhando as experiências de Santo Tomé e Príncipe sobre as questões de igualdade salarial, do trabalho de igual valor. A igualdade salarial do trabalho de igual valor entre homens e mulheres é um tema extremamente importante a nível dos países, sobretudo os países frágeis e afetados por conflitos, para que possamos promover a justiça social, para estabelecer a confiança entre pessoas, comunidades, governos e cumprirmos com a Agenda 2030, adotada em 2015, para o desenvolvimento sustentável. A Agenda 2030 veio justamente afirmar objetivos 5, 8 e também os 17 Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável. Sabemos que a igualdade salarial nos outros países do mundo não acontece, a igualdade salarial entre homens e mulheres. O que temos sim é uma desigualdade em termos de oportunidades para as mulheres. Ou seja, tanto os homens como as mulheres recebem os mesmos salários. Há o salário mínimo nacional que é praticado para todos os setores, tanto da função pública como para o setor privado. Portanto, este ano, por exemplo, houve uma valorização do salário mínimo, com um esforço extremo por parte do governo, tendo em conta que Santo Tomé e Príncipe é um país insular e que depende sobremaneira de alguma ajuda externa, não é fácil fazer o aumento salarial, mas, entretanto, estamos a dar esses grandes saltos. Para dizer também que esse aumento é numa perspectiva de justiça social, tendo em conta que a pandemia Covid-19, assim como a guerra na Ucrânia, veio exacerbar as condições de vida das populações. Portanto, nós pautamos sempre pela defesa da igualdade salarial para o trabalho de igual valor e não existe essa discriminação como acontece nos outros países. Para dizer que nós temos vários exemplos a nível de Santo Tomé e Príncipe em termos de audácia feminina. Nós já tivemos várias mulheres em cargos de soberania, presidente da Assembleia, mulheres em cargos de chefia, cerca de 33% de mulheres em cargos de chefias. A nível parlamentar, nós temos cerca de 1/4 das mulheres, equivalente mais ou menos a 14%. É um pouco, não é? Mas com pequenos passos vamos lá chegar. Para dizer que também institucionalizamos desde 2007 o Instituto do Gênero, o Instituto para a Promoção da Equidade e Igualdade de Gênero, que é um instituto que trata de toda a política relacionada com a equidade de gênero e que tem o pelouro pela implementação de várias estratégias e programas a nível de igualdade e equidade de gênero. Hoje, nós já estamos a orçamentar para o gênero, ou seja, fazemos um orçamento com base em políticas e estratégias que nos traga, digamos, que nos traga, por exemplo, ganhos a nível de gênero, que tenham impacto. Portanto, em São Tomé e Príncipe, hoje, nós temos várias redes de mulheres políticos que têm a missão de trabalhar nas comunidades, tanto com os homens como as mulheres, para sensibilizarmos essa camada de forma que possamos ter efetivamente a equidade de gênero. Esse grupo de mulheres, elas tentam sensibilizar o caminho no mercado de trabalho. Portanto, é desde a tenra idade que se deve trabalhar os estereótipos. Portanto, a nível de São Tomé e Príncipe, na qualidade de educação, há várias reformas da justiça para colmatar a discriminação ou, digamos, a desigualdade em termos de oportunidade para as senhoras. Várias legislações, vários pacotes legislativos foram aprovados. Temos, por exemplo, temos o Código do Trabalho, temos a política de equidade e igualdade de gênero, estipulamos cotas também para as mulheres a nível parlamentar. Estamos a trabalhar no sentido de nós terminarmos, acabamos também com, digamos assim, masculina. Estamos a encorajar a participação das mulheres também com esses programas de sensibilização. As escolas também, a nível educacional, programas específicos com as meninas e com os meninos para que mudem de comportamento. Temos vários programas de apoios financeiros também para apoiar o empreendedorismo jovem, tirar a mulher que possam contribuir sobremaneira para o desenvolvimento sustentável do nosso país. Nós também incentivamos a fazerem contratação de recursos humanos, digamos, políticas de contratação com base em gênero. Tanto a grosso modo, é o que tenho para falar a nível de São Tomé e Príncipe, dizer que a desigualdade em termos de digamos, só países, é para todos os países, e acredito que G7+, estamos aqui no G7+, justamente para nós fazermos essa partilha, digamos assim, de experiência, boas práticas, e para que possamos pela palavra concedida e
I think Ms. Neuza is finished with her intervention. Ms. Desia.
Eu já terminei.
Okay. So thank you, Neuza, for providing us the bigger picture of challenges and reform in São Tomé e Príncipe in order to close the gender pay gap. I noticed that we also have Her Excellency Minister of Foreign Affairs of São Tomé e Príncipe in the room already. We have Her Excellency Edith Tenjuan. Welcome to the forum. I will just continue with the sessions and then I'll hand over to the moderator to lead the forum itself. So let us go through the second questions that I have prepared for the panel, for the panelists in here. The second question that I would like to both of you, represented from South Sudan and also Ms. Neuza, to answers. I really highlighted on the what further steps or partnership that may be necessary to address the challenges, the reforms that you're doing at the country level, in order for us to have an inclusive path, social justice and development in your country. Thank you. I think because I've started with South Sudan, so let me give the floor to Ms. Neuza to start again, and then we will go back to South Sudan. Thank you. Ms. Neuza, yours.
Posso falar só com o teu micro, não é? Pronto. A nível de São Tomé e Príncipe, relativamente à questão de como mudar esta fotografia, digamos assim, em termos de digamos, ou seja, estamos a trabalhar no sentido de nós diminuirmos os estereótipos que impedem as mulheres de contribuírem sob maneira para o desenvolvimento do nosso país. Temos várias estratégias, como eu tinha dito anteriormente. Estamos a trabalhar no sentido, como por exemplo o Ministério das Finanças, no sentido de priorizarem mais as políticas que, digamos, que tragam resultados para a igualdade de gênero. Portanto, neste sentido, estamos a trabalhar com isso. Há vários projetos em carteiras, vários fóruns, várias sensibilizações a nível do próprio país, do Instituto do Gênero, visando, digamos, ultrapassar esses desafios, não é? Digamos assim, que nós temos a nível do nosso país. Doutora Elsa. Não sei se ainda ligar o som quando acaba de falar. Então, vou tirar o som da ela, não é? Senhora Ana, agora não sei se estava a ouvir.
Sim, estamos. Eu julgo que, não sei se a Elche continua.
Pois, acho que a senhora...
Elche, pronto, já está. Já está. Foi internet.
I've missed the last part of Ms. Neuza's intervention, so I'll just turn.
Elche, you're still muted.
Sorry, these things sometimes can be annoying. Thank you again, Ms. Neuza, for your intervention, which I apologize, I missed the last part due to the internet connections. But let me turn to Ms. Amer Magnon from South Sudan. Ms. Amer, how serious of the issue equal pay in South Sudan as what you see, and then what are the partnerships that may be necessary to address these equal pay for equal work challenges in your country itself? The floor is yours, and you have 5 minutes for that. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much once again. And we are very grateful to sharing experience with G7. G7 plus. In fact, we need to create more awareness to women of South Sudan to know their right so that they can be able to demand their spaces when maybe they are not paid equally, or maybe when they are bullied somewhere, because the mindset of the South Sudanese, all in general, the women are less than men. So most of the time, even the women, most of them accept that they are really less than men. So they don't have that capability to push for their issues and demand their space and their rights. So we need to create more awareness and empower them economically so that they can be able to compete, because the poverty is on women in a very big note. And also education, the adult education, the illiteracy is high. So we need to do more for the women to understand why is it so important for them to demand their space. For example, what the Women Bloc did during 2013, 2015, and we signed the agreement on behalf of women of South Sudan, we demand the space first. And we demand our right to be documented in the RCs, in the agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan. And we demand the 35 affirmative action so that it is signed, so that it is not verbally communicated like during the CPA. People used to talk about 25%, but it was not documented. So the only missing point is gender analysis and gender mainstreaming. What is to engender the institution, because you can still get the gap. There are a lot of gaps, although the policies documenting the 35% affirmative action and the space, but the space itself, we are not getting it. And the equal rights on, for example, we demand the biddings and the contracts in the business, so that we can be able to be awarded with the 35% biddings we are not getting. So there are a lot of gaps. So that is why the women are still suffering. Thank you. Yes, our brother Chwil, which is our consultant, also can add.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for this chance. Amir has nailed it down all. But the biggest challenge that is missing, despite the favorable policy statement in everything, is one major thing is civic education and ability of women to do public policy making process through policy research, policy design, to lobby for legislation and lobby for program, and then also call for enforcement. So those aspects are left for women become like underdog. So everybody is complaining that something is missing. It is true, something is missing, but there is no proactive, pragmatic approach to do the research, policy design, and seek legislation and enforcement. Thank you very much.
Back to you.
Yeah, back to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you for Ms. Amir and the gentleman. I can hear from the discussion itself, reinforcing on the civic education and raising awareness. So just a quick follow-up question. So where is this equal pay for equal work lies between them? If you could just elaborate further on that, and then we can close the session. Thank you.
For you again.
Yes, for us. This is on. Yeah, in fact, we have individuals who complain in the places of work, complain about being either not promoted or either not being paid equally with their colleagues. But those one need documentation so that we have a concrete document to follow up through the
Evidence-based.
yeah, evidence-based. So those gaps are existing. Those gaps are existing. Any additional? Thank you.
Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Amir, for emphasizing that there is a data. It's just that the way that should be developed, and also raise the awareness at the higher level that needs to put a lot of effort on that. And I think for this session, this will be the end of the discussion that I have with the two great panelists. I have Ms. Nilza from São Tomé Príncipe, and I also have Ms. Amir. I just want to make sure I pronounce your name correctly. Ms. Amir Manyok from South Sudan. Thank you all panelists once again for the rich discussion that we have for the sessions. And thank you also for the audience joining this session, especially our colleagues from Dili. It's already late evening here. As you may heard from the discussion that we have, despite some of the good effort progress that we made, there is still much more needs to be done at the global level to be recognized. And I hope this Women Forum will raise more awareness to all leaders and the actors involved to embed gender pay equality as one of the central goals of our policies and practice to benefit our society and our economy at large as we recover from the pandemic. Thank you all, and I will now hand over back to Mana Ana Caetano.
Muito obrigada, Elche. Em nome aqui da delegação de Lisboa, um grande agradecimento a todos os nossos colegas que estão em Dili. Sabemos que a hora já é avançada em Timor-Leste. O mesmo agradecimento para São Tomé e Príncipe e para Sudão do Sul. Muito obrigada por terem estado connosco neste debate. Passo de imediato à senhora doutora Edith Tenjoun, que é Ministra dos Negócios Estrangeiros e das Comunidades de São Tomé e Príncipe, Sua Excelência, que poderá então assumir a presidência, a co-presidência deste fórum. Agradecemos imenso o esforço que fez para estar connosco, de Lisboa para São Tomé e Príncipe, um agradecimento do Secretariado-Geral de Timor-Leste e da Delegação de Lisboa, e passo de imediato a palavra a Sua Excelência, a Senhora Ministra. Muito obrigada por ter conseguido estar connosco. Muito obrigada mesmo.
Muito obrigada também. Muito obrigada. Eu vou fazer o protocolo, até por ser Ministra dos Negócios Estrangeiros. Vou começar, interessante, portanto, ao Sr. Dr. Hélder da Costa, o Secretário-Geral do G7+, a Sra. Doutora Sara Cliff, enquanto Diretora do Centro de Cooperação Internacional da Universidade de Nova Iorque, a Sra. Adi Camara, a Presidente Permanente do Fórum G7+ Mulheres, a Sra. Embaixadora Sato Cleven, a Sra. Doutora Rita Correia, a Sra. Doutora Nicole Gissoni, a Sra. Doutora Ana Caetano. Não sei se a Doutora Milena Pires está, mas também me endereço a ela, e também, claro, a todos os participantes e pontos focais. Começaria naturalmente por agradecer este convite que me foi feito para participar neste fórum de mulheres do G7+, e ter aqui, portanto, a oportunidade de podermos, enfim, partilhar algumas experiências no que tange esta temática mais vasta da igualdade salarial, do trabalho de igual valor, em várias sessões. A última, penso que foi sobre a implementação da remuneração igual para o trabalho igual. Eu gostaria de referir que os princípios que o G7+ prossegue no sentido de endereçar as situações de conflito, sejam eles ativos ou recentes, bem como as diversas situações de fragilidade, no meu ponto de vista, mostram-se mais atuais do que nunca. Vivemos desafios transversais de todos os países, desde o surgimento das novas doenças recentemente, e ainda estamos na situação da pandemia do Covid-19, também o regresso de antigas doenças, conflitos bélicos, terrorismo, o recrudescimento da fome, e, portanto, eu digo, do ponto de vista do contexto económico global, eu diria que ele parece preocupante, e se nós juntarmos a questão da desigualdade, seguramente que teremos aqui uma equação ainda muito mais complicada. A temática da igualdade salarial é um direito fundamental. No caso de São Tomé e Príncipe, ele tem consagração constitucional, mas também é um elemento que tem que ser visto no sentido do grande significado que tem para aquilo que é a dignidade humana. E, portanto, a importância da igualdade salarial entre homens e mulheres reside, se calhar, e sobretudo no facto de que é um importante reflexo do que é a política de justiça social num país. E, portanto, decorre, desde logo, a necessidade de comatar, digamos assim, essas injustiças. E, no caso em particular de São Tomé e Príncipe, diria que nós temos prosseguido este desiderato através da elaboração e a promoção de políticas públicas que enderecem especificamente as questões do género. Consideramos naturalmente de extrema importância os instrumentos de cariz internacional a que aderimos, como é o caso da Agenda 2030, e em que, em particular, afirma, portanto, a relevância da igualdade entre homens e mulheres como forma fundamental para que possamos também alcançar os diversos ODS. E nós consideramos também que a questão da desigualdade, a desigualdade baseada no género, ela está em grande medida relacionada com a questão da educação, com fatores culturais também muitas vezes e também com a própria percepção dos direitos individuais e fatores como a violência doméstica, o abuso sexual contra as mulheres, infelizmente ainda é uma realidade em várias latitudes, infelizmente também ainda em São Tomé e Príncipe, e o que exige naturalmente um papel muito mais claro e mais acutilante por parte da Justiça. A nossa realidade em São Tomé e Príncipe é que as mulheres participam efetivamente em todas as esferas e setores de atividade, desde o político ao económico. A nossa história demonstra de uma forma muito clara que nós já tivemos 2 mulheres no cargo de primeira-ministra e chefe de governo, temos mulheres que assumiram por diversas vezes e diversas mulheres a tutela de vários ministérios, inclusive o Ministério da Defesa, a nível da governação do Banco Central, nos conselhos de Estado, nas missões diplomáticas, no judiciário, entre outras. As políticas públicas têm sido, assim, elaboradas na perspectiva da igualdade e equidade do género, que é uma política também que foi adotada, e penso já houve aqui a oportunidade da doutora Neuza referir em 2007, momento também, portanto, no decorrer dos tempos, fomos também adotando outros instrumentos fundamentais para esta matéria, nomeadamente a questão da lei para a igualdade e equidade do género, a lei contra a violência doméstica e agora mais recentemente, por ocasião da revisão do pacote das leis eleitorais, foi contemplado também, digamos que, a cota de participação das mulheres, sobretudo do ponto de vista parlamentar. E também implementamos o Instituto Nacional para a Promoção e Igualdade do Género, cuja missão é justamente a realização, enfim, dessa estratégia nacional. Foi aqui referido pela doutora Neuza, mas eu gostaria também de alguma forma referir uma pretensão, mais do que isso mesmo, previsão do Orçamento Geral do Estado, por seu lado, também ter em consideração o fator do género, de modo naturalmente a mitigar essas desigualdades o empreendedorismo jovem também e as campanhas de sensibilização vocacionadas para as mulheres. Em São Tomé e Príncipe, as mulheres são muito ativas, como já disse, tive a oportunidade de dizer, estão nas várias esferas da vida são tomense, até porque em muitos casos, infelizmente, um pouco fruto da desagregação familiar, muitas vezes encontramos mulheres que são chefes de família, mas as mulheres têm-se, enfim, organizado e associado em organismos coletivos que são representativos das várias classes profissionais que representam, ou pelo menos dos interesses que elas preconizam, nós preconizamos. Não obstante, eu penso que é relevante de qualquer das formas fazer um reforço das políticas públicas através daquilo que muita gente não concordará, mas não há outra forma de se conseguir algum equilíbrio senão por via daquilo que é a própria discriminação positiva a favor das mulheres. sobretudo daquelas que laboram nos setores mais informais. E, portanto, é preciso nós continuarmos a investir cada vez mais na educação, associado ao próprio papel da família, nas escolas também, com vista a que nós possamos, enfim, alcançar a autovalorização pessoal, a consciencialização dos direitos e também tudo isto com vista a que as mulheres possam alcançar também autossuficiência económica e também financeira. No contexto do salário entre homens e mulheres, também já tivemos a oportunidade de ouvir aqui da parte de São Tomense, da doutora Neuza, que me precedeu, que em São Tomé e Príncipe, efetivamente, temos a igualdade salarial a nível da administração pública. De qualquer das formas, temos-lo feito com um esforço muito grande e também com muitas restrições a nível de algumas organizações internacionais, nomeadamente as de Bretton Woods, portanto nós temos algumas limitações, mas a verdade é que nós temos, é uma realidade, a igualdade salarial. Não obstante, ao fazer esta síntese, não quero com isto passar que temos a situação ideal, não, estamos cada dia a dar um passo mais no sentido desta igualdade e por isso eu diria que nós temos um longo caminho ainda a percorrer no sentido de termos um salário mais justo e também de conseguirmos encontrar mais oportunidades, mais acesso para as mulheres. Eu terminava com uma última nota, dizer que esta luta pelos direitos das mulheres é sim uma luta das mulheres, mas também é uma luta dos homens a favor das mulheres. Muito obrigada.
Senhora Ministra, muito obrigada pela sua intervenção, muito inspiradora ver uma mulher também na posição de Ministra dos Negócios Estrangeiros. Agradecemos a colaboração de São Tomé e Príncipe, como país dos G7+, sempre disponível para estar com os G7 e com as suas iniciativas. Ficamos honrados com a sua presença. E antes de encerrar o fórum, passamos a palavra, ou melhor, passaremos a um vídeo de Sua Excelência, o Sr. Secretário de Estado dos Negócios Estrangeiros e da Cooperação de Portugal, o Sr. Dr. Francisco André, que enviou para o fórum uma mensagem gravada e que de seguida iremos reproduzir. Damos por encerrado, após as palavras do Sr. Secretário de Estado, este fórum, deixamos um agradecimento a todos aqueles que nos acompanharam e que se juntaram a nós, desde Timor-Leste ao Sudão do Sul e a São Tomé e Príncipe, e àqueles que estão aqui na delegação de Lisboa e que nos acompanham em todo o lado, via Facebook e através das redes sociais, e deixamos o maior agradecimento à nossa moderadora, a doutora Elche Silvestre, que está connosco em Dili. Passo então a pedir que seja exibido o vídeo que nos foi feito chegar pelo Sr. Secretário de Estado. Muito obrigada a todos da delegação do Secretariado em Lisboa, e despedimos-nos em nome do Sr. Dr. Hélder da Costa, da Sra. Embaixadora da Finlândia em Portugal e da Abu Camara, até ao nosso próximo encontro, que esperemos que seja em novembro, para a terceira edição do Fórum dos G7+ Women, com outros tópicos de relevo sobre os direitos da mulher e a promoção desses mesmos direitos nos países frágeis dos G7+. Muito obrigada.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I address you this message marking the closure of the second G7+ Forum on Women, Resilience and Development. This morning's debate has gathered experts from different countries that brought rich perspectives and varied experiences on matters that are of the highest importance. Portugal is honored to host in Lisbon the G7+ European Hub, and we remain committed to supporting initiatives such as this on gender equality and women empowerment. Capacity building and advocacy on gender equality and women's empowerment are strategic and central in Portugal's development cooperation policy. And they are essential to the accomplishment of the 2030 agenda across all areas, and will remain a cross-cutting priority of Portugal's future national strategy through 2030. In these last 2 years, 10.5% of total Portuguese ODA was channeled to bilateral projects that had a gender marker, as per the OECD criteria, of course, amounting to over 78 million euros. Therefore, we take quite seriously the promotion and protection of women's labor and human rights in the workplace. In this regard, it is paramount importance to forward targeted measures such as universal minimum wage, social protection, equal pay for equal work, as well as reducing occupational segregation and the gender pay gaps. Portugal is also fully aligned with the European Union Action Plan on Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment in External Relations 2020-2025. This action plan aims to accelerate progress on empowering women and girls and safeguarding gains made on gender equality during the 25 years since the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and its platform for action. Even though there has been important progress in the last years, the path for gender equality is still a very challenging one, especially considering the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19 and the overall regression that vulnerable groups have experienced since the pandemic. But this is further aggravated by the difficult times we are living in Europe, with the war in Ukraine and its global negative consequences. What we are witnessing in Ukraine with Russia's illegal and unacceptable aggression reinforces the need to address fragility with a renewed commitment to a robust, unwavering and stronger multilateral framework as the only way forward. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we must not forget that this is the last decade to fully implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and that we need to redouble our efforts and energy towards successfully achieving the gender equality and women empowerment goals. You can count on Portugal as a trusted partner in jointly working towards achieving these objectives that are also central to the G7+. Only by pursuing these goals can we make our world more equal, more inclusive and more prosperous. Thank you all.